Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 612 for the 5th of July, 2020. Richard Saunders coming to you this week from Sydney, Australia, which is hardly a surprise because travel at the moment is a bit difficult. Yeah. Coming up on this week's show, somewhere I wouldn't mind travelling to at the moment, Hollywood. We talk to James Underdown from the Centre for Inquiry Investigations Group in Hollywood. He's going to tell us about the newly bumped up prize for paranormal power. Now, there are various prizes around the world for any psychic or mystic or healer or medium, small, medium or large, who can prove their paranormal claims. And there are thousands upon thousands of people around the world claiming paranormal power of one degree or another. They can talk with the dead, they can find hidden water, they can do all sorts of things, even homeopathy. Well, now the prize has been bumped up to $250,000 US, which is a lot more than $250,000 in Australia. James Underdown will tell us about that and some of the people the investigations group have tested over the years. Following that, it's Logical Fallacies with Michelle Bickersma. This week, Michelle's going to be look at the fallacy of relative privation. And to round off this week's show, it's the Book of Tim Mendham, with what goes around from the pages of the Skeptic magazine, the journal from Australian Skeptics, this week sort of looking at ghosts and ghouls and that sort of thing. Oh, and somewhere in this week's episode, someone writes a letter about a cookbook. Not sure what that's all about. We'll find out a bit later on. Now, folks, I've been enjoying lots of online skeptical talks lately. I've even given a few. Susan Gerbic is particularly busy. She appeared here in Sydney, Australia for our Sydney Skeptics in the Pub to give us a talk on Thursday night last, which meant she had to stay up to 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. to give her talk. So hats off, Susan Gerbic. Well done. It's weird, because now everyone's online to give talks and hear talks. Well, sometimes you have to get up at weird hours of the day or the night, or both, to take part or listen to talks. But it's great that they are available. And speaking of online talks, check out the Skeptics in the Pub online from the UK. If you go to Facebook and just look for Skeptics in the Pub online, I'll put a link in this week's show notes. They have regular talks coming out of the UK with very interesting guests indeed, with all sorts of points of view. Well, if we can't go to the pub and enjoy a nice dinner and a drink, at least we can do the same at home. And in fact, there's a promotion a bit later on in the show I played a week or two back about enjoying Victorian skeptics talks online. Stay tuned at the end of the episode for more announcements from me. Now it's time for me to run downstairs, have a particularly large mug of hot chocolate. A good excuse for some luxuriating, I think. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Folks, for many years, the Australian Skeptics have been offering a $100,000 prize for anyone who can prove paranormal or supernatural ability of any kind under agreed testing conditions. And this brings me to a recent announcement from the Centre for Inquiry Investigations Group. Psychic, telepathic, telekinetic, prove it and win $250,000. For 2 decades, the Centre for Inquiry Investigations Group has offered those who profess to have supernatural, paranormal, or occult abilities the opportunity to definitively prove their claims under mutually agreed upon testing conditions. Many have tried, but no one has successfully passed the CFIIG challenge, and there is still a parade of self-professed psychics and mediums who claim to have special powers, but none have allowed themselves to be truly tested. So CFIIG is raising the stakes, offering what was once a $100,000 prize and bumping it up to $250,000. Joining me now, all the way from amazing, spectacular, must be a bit strange these days, Hollywood, it's James Underdown from the Center for Inquiry Investigations Group. Hello, James.
Hi, Richard. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. I don't think we've seen each other for a while. We usually meet up at these conferences and meetings, don't we?
Yeah, seems like Las Vegas is where we see each other most, but you get to LA every now and then, though, don't you?
Every now and then. I don't know when the next time will be. It might be a while.
Well, especially now that America has become the pariah of all countries in terms of travel.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, I must admit it's not looking too good at the moment. But let's talk about some other things to try and take people's minds off the current calamity. Tell me about the investigations group. When did it start? Why did it start? And what do you do?
We started the IIG at two buildings ago at the Center for Inquiry. And in 2000, in January of 2000. So we're 20 and a half as of this recording. And, the idea of it was the people, I started the group, but I brought people in who were big fans of James Randi, big fans of Joe Nickel, big fans of Skeptical Inquirer. And we were interested in all this stuff. And we thought, well, we have all these talented individuals right here in Los Angeles. Why don't we poke around a little bit into some of these claims and see what's doing?
Yeah, I mean, and this has been a hallmark from skeptical organizations. If I think about even here in Australia, way back in 1980, James Randi came here, and he and with some Australian businessmen at the time were offering a large cash prize for water divining, water dowsing in that case. So how long has there been a cash prize associated with what you're doing?
Well, we started in our early days. I and a few other members of the group put up some of our own money. So we started out with a $5,000 prize. Then we had someone come in, and I think we raised it to 10 or 25, something like that. And that went for a long time. So that was all based on our personal bank accounts. And I'll tell you, when you got skin in the game, you make sure those test protocols are pretty tight. As if I don't now, but, still. And then, I've been with the Center for Inquiry since 99, since even before the investigations group got started. So I think it was 2014 or 15, we started some serious negotiations about CFI taking on some of the financial prize money. So we upped it to 50 and then 100,000 backed by CFI. And then finally, when Robin Blumner became president and CEO of CFI, it's too many abbreviations.
Yeah.
She said, would you be interested in CFI just sort of subsuming the IIG and teaming up? And I thought, we have this close relationship anyway, we might as well. And then I talked the board of directors into upping it to $250,000, especially since, Randi and JREF really haven't tested anyone in quite some time. And so, that was part of our argument that I think it's the biggest single prize in the world right now. So we like to, keep it well into six figures to tempt all the claimants.
And I must admit, it sounds good. And it didn't occur to me until you said it. $250,000. That's a good sound, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. That's I try to teach myself to say it that way instead of 250. Once you get that million word in there,
Hmm.
it opens some eyes.
Yeah, yeah. It's got that catch. It's a wonderful thing. Maybe I can convince the locals here in Australia to up ours to $250,000. Although $250,000 Australian isn't quite the same as $250,000 US because our dollar's not so good.
It's still big cash though, and
It's still big cash. Now, of course, you've been involved with investigations, the investigations group for the cash prize over the years. What are some of the more memorable ones that stand out? And I'll jump in here quickly, and I noticed on your webpage, which is cfiig.org, there's even a mention of you testing the power balance wristband.
that is one of the more notable ones because we had an Olympic gymnast, Dominique Dawes, was working for Yahoo News at the time, and they called us up and they said, we heard about your work, and what do you think about some of these athletic things? And we said, I'd love to do a double blind test of power balance bracelets. And so we set up this obstacle course that tested its three basic claims: strength, uh, not agility, but flexibility, and I think it
Flexibility,
was
yes, that's right.
a speed or something like that. So the
Strength, balance, and flexibility, I
balance,
seem to
that's what it
remember.
was: balance, strength,
Balance,
balance,
yeah,
and
yeah,
flexibility. So
that's right.
we designed this little obstacle course in the Center for Inquiry at our old location on Hollywood Boulevard, and ran 16 people through this course four times. Each time they ran it with a different wristband on, and they never knew whether they had
Hmm.
the real power balance bracelet on or
Right,
the three fake ones.
right.
And then we had to correct for what was it called, the order effect, it's called, because when you do something athletic like that for the first time, naturally you just get better. The more times you do it, you get a little bit better at it. So
Mm-hmm.
we made sure that people were staggered in different orders, so that all sort of evened out. And then, surprise, surprise, there was no difference between the real power balance bracelet and the other ones. We were watching you guys, and you had some legal success with them, didn't you? They had to change their claims.
Yeah, yeah. After it was just one of those, amazing things that after they were tested here in Australia on Australian TV, I simply put them to a standard double-blind test. It was nothing too amazing about it. But when they failed that, eventually the pressure was put upon them to print a retraction in the media here to say that the claims that they made were without foundation, which was great for us. It was good. But when I did it, when I tested the guy here in Australia, I was under the impression that he was a true believer. He really did believe in the product.
Funny thing about that stuff is, if they just make a vague claim like this can help with athletic performance, it actually can, but no more than a lucky penny or a rabbit's foot or anything like
Right.
that. If you have a psychological advantage, it could help. But, you know, double blind tells the tale, and that didn't help in that case.
No, it did not. Now, recently I've noticed that there's another test that you've undertaken. What the hell? Lightning Man? What's that all about?
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you guys have done this before, but I think it may be the first time anyone has been tested for a cash paranormal prize during a pandemic.
It must be true. We haven't done it.
I don't, I don't think that's going to make the Guinness Book of Records, but it sounds funny to me. But yeah, this guy
Yeah.
showed up. He said that he could make electricity come out of his hands noticeably. He said he could create lightning in the sky above the Center for Inquiry. So I
Wow.
promptly went and checked the weather report for the Saturday that we had him over, and and then finally he said he could teleport 3 to 5 feet at one time.
Oh,
And so we did a social distancing paranormal challenge.
oh wow.
uh,
Now, they are some amazing claims, I must admit. Teleporting is one we haven't tested.
well, yeah, and you kind of have to. He said before he got there, I said, tell me a little bit more about this. And he said he can move 3 to 5 feet at a time. And I said, are you jumping? Is there in my mind, teleportation is you actually disappear from one spot and reappear in another spot. Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
And he said, well, yeah, but I have to be moving when I do this. And I said, the moving isn't part of it, is it? So,
Oh, dear.
we were, and I mean, the funny thing, well, it's actually not funny because I think he might be a little mentally ill. He thinks he did it,
Okay.
and he thinks that the lightning came out of his hands and was in the sky and all this stuff. And he asked us if we saw it, and I said, no, we didn't. Do you want to see? We can run the video back. Would that convince you that it didn't happen? If it, in order to win our money, we have to see it. It can't just be you that sees it. So, we get in these delicate situations where people really are sometimes experiencing symptoms of schizophrenia or other disorders where they're hearing and seeing things that no one else is. And we have to tell them, you have to consider that this is maybe what's causing your experiences.
Yeah, and it's a tough part about doing these paranormal tests. As you and I both know, over the years and years we've been doing it, occasionally we'll get somebody who come along, and it's not trying to put them down or make excuses or anything like that, but not everybody who applies for our tests are in a very good state of mind, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice way of putting it. And I don't know if it's my imagination or not, but it seems like over maybe even the past year, certainly the last 6 months, the percentage of people who seem to be experiencing symptoms consistent with mental illness seems to be very high percentage of them. Back in the day when both of our groups were testing, dowsers don't seem to fall into this category. And there are other people who, seem to just be regular people who are, making categorical errors or logical errors, and they're not understanding what's happening. But over the last 6 months or a year, it seems like a high percentage of people who are hearing voices or who are convinced that other people are hearing their thoughts.
Yeah. And again, it's just something that a lot of the people, the general public, may not consider. That's something that we have to seriously look at and decide what to do if someone comes along who is obviously, shall we say, troubled, and take it accordingly.
Yeah, and we'll test you anyway. I mean, you could make the argument that your mind has to be in a certain state to perform a paranormal feat. That theoretically could be the case. So we're not going to eliminate you based on that. We just encourage people to sort of eliminate that set of explanations and save themselves the trouble and potential embarrassment of being tested and failing.
Yeah, because we're of a similar mind. We're not out to embarrass or demean or humiliate anybody. This is a genuine attempt to see what the claims are and if people can live up to them.
Right. Exactly.
The other one I'll get you to talk about briefly is an evergreen, and it was just a wonderful thing. I wish I could have been there. Is when you tested the curvature of the Earth.
I'll tell you, I don't know maybe I'm getting too old for this, but my patience is it's really tested. That's my test, is keeping my head. We went out. There's a fairly large body of water called the Salton Sea that's 150 miles southeast of Los Angeles. It's actually a kind of a rank, nasty, extremely salty body of water.
Mm-hmm.
But we chose it because there were a lot of clear sight lines. When the desert is, it's in the desert. When the desert is calm and the wind is not blowing, the air quality is pretty good, and the temperatures are pretty consistent. So there were a lot of good reasons to go out there, and the distances were about right. We chose a spot from shore to shore that was about 9.5 miles across, and at that distance, you would expect to have to put something about 30 to 40 feet in the air before someone with a telescope would be able to see that object. The curvature would
Mm-hmm.
cover the first 30 or 40 feet on the other side. So, we sort of lined this demonstration up with a bunch of flat earthers, of which there are plenty in Southern California.
Yeah.
And
I bet.
National Geographic Explorer television show came out, and we conducted that shore to shore experiment. And we also did another one that was a boat based experiment where we sent a small motorized boat, rubber raft, out with a sort of a big flag that had horizontal stripes on it. And the
Mm-hmm.
idea was that, the farther out they got, the more of the stripes or stripe would disappear. And so, yeah, there were like 15 of us and 20 flat earthers out there in National Geographic, and they saw pretty much everything we saw. And I'll tell you, I mean, we both, anyone science minded has no doubt that the earth is a sphere. But to some of these tests and demonstrations of the earth's shape, are fraught with potential perils. For instance, the balloon target that we were launching on one side of the Salton Sea, even a little bit of breeze was blowing this thing so it wanted to, sort of fly
Right.
sideways, and it was making it hard to control and it was hard to measure. And even finding the thing at 9.6 miles away was a difficult chore. So that was one of it. And, if the water gets a little choppy, and that doesn't even count
Yeah.
some of these other, atmospheric condition issues that arise. Anyone who's ever seen a mirage or, reflection that looks like water on the horizon or anything like that, if you're getting different temperatures between air layers, it can actually bend light over distance. And that's what a mirage is. You're seeing something that is should be too far away to see like that, but you're seeing a reflection in an air layer. So anyway, it's it's harder than it seems to prove
Yeah.
something obvious like that.
Well, you're absolutely right, because this is what we came across here in Australia. We come across this when we're testing people. I remember it in Las Vegas. The time and the effort and the planning and the cooperation of who is making the claim. It all takes an enormous amount of time, and I guess people really don't think about that because it's not something they would normally do.
Right. And some of these things, I mean, there was one test we tested this woman who was I think you know of her, Anita Ikonen, who's a Swedish national. Because I think Randy might have done a quick test with her or something. But
Rings a bell, yeah.
her claim was being able. She said that she could look into a human being and see if they were missing a kidney or not.
Yes, I remember it. Yes, yes.
So we had to. I mean, it became extraordinarily complex. We first of all we had to find four people who were missing a kidney, and not only
Yeah.
did we have to find four people who were missing a kidney, and try to Google that, try to go to a hospital and say, "Can we have some of your people who are missing kidneys?" You know, um, not only do we have to find 4 people who are missing kidneys, 3 for the actual test, and 1 to demonstrate that she actually had the power beforehand. But we also had to find people who were missing their left kidneys. Wait a minute. Was it their left? Yeah, missing their right kidney. Because most people who donate a kidney donate the left kidney. It's easier to operate and pull out a left kidney for various medical reasons. And that's common knowledge in the we learned ahead of time, fortunately. So everyone who donates a kidney on purpose donates their left kidney. And forgive me if I get this backwards, but I'm pretty sure it's the left one because your liver's on the right side and there's other stuff in there, and it's just more difficult. So we figured that she knew that fact and would guess left kidney every time. So we're trying to find right kidney, people missing right kidney. So that was part of it. Then we had to find, let's see, there was 1 person missing a kidney in each group of 6. So we had to find 15 more people beyond the 4 missing kidney people. Then, in order to verify this, we had to get an ultrasound machine to the Center for Inquiry and a tech to be able to run the ultrasound machine, which all cost money. We had to serve lunch. I mean, it took like 30 people to run this test. And
it's not a simple thing. It's just not a simple thing. Really.
No, it's crazy. And for stuff like that, we don't pay for the applicants. We don't pay for their travel or anything. And when their alleged ability involves front money and hiring people and all this other stuff, they have to pay for that. And she fronted the money for it, to her credit.
Oh, wow. It's the same situation here in Australia. The claimant bears the costs of any test, which we think is fair enough, because if they're genuine, they're going to make many more dollars back than they put into it in the first place. And finally, with the flat earthers and so on, you must have, as we do here, you must have heard some pretty amazing excuses and reasons why they fail.
Yeah, I have this. I think we might even have a physical copy of it somewhere, but I have this, at least an informal, what I call the big book of excuses. And I know you guys have heard this one, but one of the more common ones is too much skeptical energy in the room.
Yep.
So that was
that'll do it every time.
One guy was doing he said he could predict a binary outcome. So in this case, it wasn't a coin flip. It was actually, we had a regular 6-sided die, and 3 of the sides were orange and 3 of the sides were black. So he said he could predict which side would come up. I think it was 53% of the time, which Jay Diamond from Jay Diamond from the San Francisco group called worst superpower ever. If you could predict a coin flip once, 53 out of 100 times, Jesus, how are you going to monetize that? That's pathetic. But if the number of rolls is large enough, and we had to, get our statisticians working on that, it could still be significant, even though it sounds kind of silly. Yeah, but I think he said that
it would take a long time.
Yeah, it did. It took all afternoon, and it was extremely tedious. We made a video of it, but boy, a lot ended up on the editing room floor in that one. And his excuse was that he didn't practice with the type of jar we were using or something. I don't know. It was just so lame.
Well, there you go. You see? You should have used the other jar after all.
Well, talk about weird things that happen that you can't predict. We actually, we had like a big pickle jar that we were shaking the die in, because you don't want us to touch it because we could be cheating. So we're shaking it around in the pickle jar, and the damn thing broke. Who could have predicted a die could break a pickle jar?
Oh.
So you never know. Anyway, it's crazy.
So, Jim, the message for people out there in the United States, I think it's in the United States. I mean, our prize is really for Australians. I imagine yours is for the people in the United States, or is your prize worldwide?
It is worldwide. We tested a guy who, over the internet, from Macedonia last year. He said he could look at a picture. So we did a Skype call. He said he could look at a picture on Skype and decide whether this person was living or dead.
Right.
And I think he was using a pendulum to do it.
Okay.
And he looked at 20 pictures and he got 11 right.
There you go.
Not very impressive.
So it's a worldwide prize, folks. If you're interested, if you think you have psychic powers or abilities, or you know somebody who does, and if you do know somebody who does and they win the prize, you're in line for what, $5,000 yourself?
$5,000 finder's fee. That's right.
Ooh.
So put the heat on your neighbor who's claiming to have these powers. You could get some money too. Almost
free money. Folks, head to cfiig.org. All the details are there, and you can read some accounts of some of the past tests of alleged paranormal or psychic ability. Well, James Underdown, all the way over there in Hollywood, one day maybe we can get together again in Los Angeles or California somewhere, or even Las Vegas when all this craziness is over. But until then, thanks very much.
Thank you, Richard. Look forward to it.
I sure do miss going to those skeptical meetings in pubs and cafes to hear talks and interact with my friends. Oh, well.
I think I can help you with that.
Who the hell are you?
I'm your skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet.
You're my skeptical... What?
Relax, Richard. I can make your wish come true.
What? You mean free beer?
No. The other wish.
Oh, really?
Yes! I have news of skeptical meetings and talks online.
Oh, yes, of course, yes.
Skeptics Cafe Online by the Vic Skeptics brings you live and interactive skeptical talks via Zoom. Anyone, anywhere in the world is welcome to join in on the third Monday of the month. Just check out the Skeptics Cafe page on Facebook to see when the next talk is and who will be presenting. Alternatively, see the Vic Skeptics website at vicskeptics.wordpress.com for details.
That sounds great. A skeptical god, fairy, angel, mother, person.
And there are similar skeptical online talks happening around the country and all over the world. All you need to do is search for them.
Wow. Now, just one more question.
Yes?
What about the beer?
Okay, all right. Well, just for you. I'll make it so you can go to the supermarket, buy whatever beer you like, and drink it while watching the talk online at home.
And they say miracles never happen.
And to think I gave up being the tooth fairy for this?
What?
Nothing. Goodbye. Logical fallacies. What are logical fallacies, and why is it important that critical thinkers should know about them? A logical fallacy is an error we can make in reasoning, but it usually crops up when we are discussing or arguing our point of view. Some people might even knowingly use them to try and score cheap points in an argument due to intellectual laziness. They are traps we can fall into, but if we know what to look out for, we can spot them when they occur and stop ourselves from using them. This time, we'll look at the relative privation fallacy.
This fallacy, also known as not as bad as, can be seen as a type of red herring or distraction. The fallacy is essentially an argument that a certain issue is not important or does not deserve attention and resources because there are other and more important issues.
Another variation of the relative privation fallacy is to compare something with the best or the worst case scenario, thus making it seem much better or worse by comparison.
As a naturopath, I can tell you that mistakes are sometimes made by practitioners of alternative medicine, but that is nothing compared to the thousands of mistakes and deaths each year due to mainstream medicine.
That people die under the care of mainstream medicine is not in doubt. But keep in mind that what mainstream medicine does is to look after millions of people who range from being mildly unwell to very unwell to being critically unwell. Yes, it's not a perfect system, but that does not justify nor diminish the mistakes made by so-called alternative medicine.
Why should we bother doing something in Australia for climate change and the environment when China and other countries are much bigger polluters?
It may well be that other countries contribute a much greater volume of greenhouse gases or other pollutants than Australia, but that is no reason at all for Australia, especially as one of the highest polluters per capita, if not as a total amount, or any other country to give up doing everything we can to combat this worldwide problem. If every country gave up using the above argument as a justification, the situation would be much, much worse.
You skeptics have been trying to debunk silly things like UFOs and psychics for years, and people still believe in them. You should give up and put your time and efforts into being skeptical of far more important issues.
This is an argument skeptical groups hear from time to time, that some people don't find investigating UFOs or homeopathy or psychics of interest is fine. But that doesn't mean skeptical groups should suddenly change their focus. We wouldn't expect the local chess club to give up chess just because someone thinks backgammon is a better game. The implication is that you cannot be real skeptics as you are not skeptical of what I am skeptical of. And what I am skeptical of is more important than what you are skeptical of. The relative privation fallacy can easily take you away from the argument in hand and have you wasting your time down some rabbit hole. Try to keep your opponent and yourself to the topic in question. Knowing a logical fallacy when you hear one, and even knowing its name, is important when arguing your point of view. However, you may come across as arrogant and not get very far if you call it out by name to your opponent when you hear it being used. If your opponent calls you out for using one, it's time to stop and think about how you are making your case. Use your knowledge of logical fallacies wisely, and remember that even if your point of view is right and you know all the pitfalls in arguing your case, it doesn't always mean you'll win on the day. And as skeptics, we must also remember that we too can be wrong at times. I'm Michelle Bickersma from the Vic Skeptics. Thanks for listening.
Oh, the Skeptic Zone. Now, there's a bunch of funky crew. Everyone who listens to the Skeptic Zone is a serious funkster. Well, there'll be some fun going on next Friday night at 8:30 at Sydney time. That's 10:30 UTC, which means Unkara time code, I think. Well, anyway, we're having the One Man Mad Club. That's right, I'll be jumping around and leaping around, and our studio engineer for the entire thing will be Richard Saunders. So the show's going to be a complete disaster, so why not watch it? We do it live at that time I told you earlier, Untitled code time, and I'll be jumping around, I'll be playing stuff, and it's easy to find because it's on my Mixcloud, basically. It's mixcloud.com/live/DJ Maynard. But hey, that's too hard. Just go to maynard.com.au and there'll be a link to it there. You probably won't see Richard, but you might not see me either because he'll be in charge of the vision and the audio. And have you heard what this show's like? Skeptic Zone listeners can look and dance and point. And if they miss the entire show because they don't live in ETC time, under the counter time. That's right, it's 10:30 under the counter time, UTC, next Friday night, or 8:30 here for those Australians. See you then. Oh, and why is it on Facebook? Well, look, any DJ who's done a live stream on Facebook will tell you why they're not on Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg can't dance.
To the publisher of Uncovered, the Hidden Secret Conspiracy Secrets Exposed to the World at Last, in secret. Dear Sir, I am writing to you to acknowledge the delivery, in a plain brown envelope, of a copy of the above-mentioned book from your company. I'm sure you can understand my keenness to read this exposé, which you assure me is a rare volume reflected in the price I paid of $1,965. My only concern is that, as of yet, I am unable to decode much of the true hidden messages within the book, that for obvious reasons is heavily encrypted. I note that even the title of the book, Basic Cooking for Dummies, is also in code. No doubt a clever way of saying cooking the books. However, I do feel I am making some progress. I draw your attention in particular to Chapter 3, brilliantly entitled The Secrets of Boiling Eggs. I cannot wait to uncover the layers of conspiracies, government cover-ups, and finally understand the references to setting the timer, turning up the heat, also add a pinch of salt, and especially stirring the pot. Please find enclosed my check for a further $1,965 for Volume 2, listed in your catalogue under the codename of Submarine Sandwiches and Other Guilty Pleasures. Yours, etc., etc. P.S. I am also confident I will soon discover the meaning of Chapter 5, Half-Baked. And now, a reading from the Book of Tim, with Tim Mendham.
Hi, this is Tim Mendham. I'm the editor of the Australian Skeptics magazine, The Skeptic, and I'm also Executive Officer for Australian Skeptics. Today, I'll be reading from The Skeptic magazine from March 2015, which is volume 35, number 1, in the section What Goes Around. And what goes around, goes around, in a story that continues, never ending. And it starts off with romance. This story is about ghosts and ghouls, sex and magic. Ghosts and haunted houses feature prominently in horror stories. Literary historian J.A. Cudden has defined the horror story as a piece of fiction in prose of variable length, which shocks or even frightens the reader, or perhaps induces a feeling of repulsion or loathing. Horror stories that are set in exotic locations, revolving around pseudo-medieval castles, dark nights, lightning, the supernatural, and a general eerie and frightening atmosphere, are often referred to as Gothic horror, a genre or mode of literature that combines fiction, horror, and romanticism. The origin of Gothic horror is attributed to English author Horace, or sometimes Horatio Walpole, with his 1764 novel The Castle of Otranto, subtitled in its second edition, A Gothic Story. Walpole, the 4th Earl of Orford, was an English art historian, man of letters, antiquarian, and Whig politician. He's remembered for Strawberry Hill, the home he built in Twickenham, southwest of London, where he revived the Gothic style some decades before his Victorian successors. He was the son of the first Prime Minister of Britain, Sir Robert Walpole, a cousin to Lord Nelson's grandmother, so everyone's connected, just like this story. In 1737, Walpole's mother died. According to one biographer, his love for his mother was, quote, the most powerful emotion of his entire life. The whole of his psychological history was dominated by it. Walpole supposedly did not have any serious relationships with women. He has been called a natural celibate. His sexual orientation has been the subject of speculation. Many contemporaries described him as effeminate. One political opponent called him a hermaphrodite horse. He never married, engaging in a succession of unconsummated flirtations with unmarriageable women. Some previous biographers have interpreted Walpole as asexual, engaged only in platonic relationships. Now, platonic love is a type of love that is chaste and non-sexual. The term is named after Plato, who was the first to describe this kind of love. The original sense of the term is examined in Plato's dialogue The Symposium, which has as its topic the subject of love, or eros, generally. It explains the possibilities of how the feeling of love began and how it has evolved, both sexually and non-sexually. Of particular importance is the speech of Socrates, relating the ideas attributed to the prophetess Diotima, which present love as a means of ascent to contemplation of the divine. For Diotima, and for Plato generally, the most correct use of love of other human beings is to direct one's mind to love of divinity. Plato himself was not always so accommodating to others. In the Symposium, he described magi, or magicians, as maleficent, while allowing a measure of efficacy as a function of the god Eros. Another who criticised the Magi was Pliny the Elder, a Roman historian, natural philosopher, naval and army commander, and personal friend of the Emperor Vespasian. In his Natural History, Pliny attacked astrology and suggested that magic originated in medicine, creeping in by pretending to offer health. He says that Plato, Pythagoras, and others travelled abroad to learn magic, remarking that it was surprising anyone accepted the doctrines they brought back. Pliny's nephew, Pliny the Younger, was a lawyer, author, and magistrate of ancient Rome. Both Pliny the Elder and Younger were witnesses to the eruption of Vesuvius on August 24, 79 AD, or CE as we call it now, during which Pliny the Elder died. Pliny the Younger was considered an honest and moderate man. He rose through a series of imperial civil and military offices, the cursus honorum. He was a friend of the historian Tacitus and employed the biographer Suetonius on his staff. What he is less well known for is that, in a letter to his patron Lucius Sura, he gave the earliest surviving report of a haunted house, a villa with a ghost of an old man bound with chains, which brings us back to haunted houses. So that was What Goes Around from March 2015 from The Skeptic. And you can download all back issues of The Skeptic from our website, skeptics.com.au, and they're available for free.
Hi, my name's Jo Thornley, and I'd like you to join my I'd like you to listen to my podcast about cults called Zealot. It's available pretty much anywhere you find podcasts, with further reading on the Zealot Facebook page. Each episode, a guest joins me to talk about a specific cult, where we answer the big questions like, is there yoga in it? Is there yoga in it? And does anyone think they're Jesus? Does anyone think they're Jesus? Pop over to my compound and have a listen. I've just mixed up a fresh batch of Kool-Aid. Oh, Zealot.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and thank you again to those wonderful people who helped to pay for the Skeptic Zone to make it possible. And I don't know if you're picking this up exactly, but just in the last week I did purchase a new studio microphone I'm using at the moment, which to my ears sounds a lot better, or a bit better, not a lot better. I mean, the microphones I've been using so far have been pretty good. This one's a little step up, so hopefully a little bit more quality listening on your end. Well, it depends what I say, I guess. And for those technically minded, you can look it up. This is the Rode NT1A microphone from Australia, and I get no kickbacks or freebies or anything from the Rode people, but they do make a very good kit indeed. But anyway, if it wasn't for the kind contributions from listeners just like you, not only couldn't I get the odd microphone from time to time, but there simply would be no Skeptic Zone. That would be packed up, archived forever, no new episodes. Fortunately, though, there are people just like you who do contribute, so thank you very much. Coming up on next week's show, some more logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersmar, and I did get some lovely feedback about that segment with Michelle, so thank you, Michelle, for continuing to do that. And soon, maybe in a couple of weeks, we'll do another think tank, because I've got more feedback from the think tank we ran on last week's show than I have for a long time, which is great. People really enjoyed it, really loved hearing Dr. Cassandra Perryman, Michelle Bickersmar, Michelle Franklin, and Trish Han, and me in the background a little bit. So we'll see if we can do some more of those soon, I think. And thank you to those wonderful reporters and your thoughtful and very interesting comments and observations during the think tank. I might be chasing up a couple of COVID stories. One that's come to my attention here in Australia, apparently a certain percentage of people who refuse to be tested on the basis that they consider the whole thing to be a hoax. Which means that all these wacky, zany, and laughable conspiracy theories you hear about can have real-life consequences and damaging consequences. Might be something worth looking into. And just before I go, why don't you tune in to Maynard next Friday night here in Australia at 8:30. Maynard is once again doing live shows, one-man mad club, he calls it, which almost anything goes. You never know what to expect, but it's a great excuse to have a beer or a wine, sit back in front of the internet device or stream to your TV and watch Maynard. So check Maynard out at maynard.com.au or head over to mixcloud.com/live/DJ-Maynard, or as some people say, Dash, DJ Maynard. I'll add a link to this week's show notes. The last one he did, just the other night, he did from the bathtub. So there you go. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation. Hello to the afterthoughts, the people who tune in after the music has ended. And this is a bit more relaxed section of the show where I play the dice game. If you haven't heard it before, I'm going to roll a 10-sided die 3 times. And it's up to you to use your psychic and mystic powers to look into the future, which is the past, because this is already recorded. But for me, it's the future. We've had this discussion before. And guess what numbers will come up, or use your mystic powers. It's a D10. So here we go. I'm going to roll it on the desk here. I'm going to turn my microphone up a little bit. Ooh, get back from the mic a bit. So a D10. First roll is on the floor. Oh, why does that always... Okay, here we go. 2. Write that down. First number this week is 2. Susan Gerbeck, I know you're listening, and I know you're going to pick 5. So here we go. Good grief. Well, that's a coincidence. Sorry, Susan. It's another 2. Sorry, got your hopes up there for a minute. You just have to trust me, folks. I always accurately tell you what the number is. Last number coming up. Hiding under the... Well, how about that? 2. It really is. I should video these things. Okay, turn my microphone down and come a bit closer. I should video these things because it really is. And it's bound to happen every now and then, isn't it? I mean, 222 is a sequence is likely to come up as 1, 5, and 9 or whatever. There you go. And that's the second time in all the years I've been doing this that the same number has appeared 3 times. Today's winning number is 2, 2, 2. There's got to be a hidden meaning in there somewhere.